Hi, this is Maggie. In this video we're going to continue working on the auction program design. In the last video we identified two actors, account holder and user, and three use cases: view active listings, make listing, and make bid. We will look at the object collaborations and responsibilities that might emerge from these requirements. In the last video we wrote the make bid use case. Assume that we have written use cases for the entire system, both the part that we were given a description for that we worked from in the last video, and the parts of the system that were not given to us previously, such as descriptions of how users create and log into accounts, how auctions are won or lost, etc. Once we have this complete set of use cases, and the client has agreed that they accurately describe system functionality, we can begin designing the system. To design the system, we look for object candidates in our use cases. Each use case will be fulfilled by objects collaborating. To find objects, we look for things, which is vague, but it's a place to start. The things that we find are not necessarily things in the real world, and they might be things that facilitate work getting accomplished, so things that only exist in software. When we look at all of the object candidates across all of the use cases, then we might find similar objects that can be consolidated into one object, or objects that have the same name but aren't really the same object because they have different data and different responsibilities. So it's important to identify object candidates, and then, once we've done this for the entire set of use cases, to evaluate those candidates and distill them into a design. An object should have a coherent set of responsibilities, and it should be as independent from the rest of the system as possible. So these are two criteria that we will use when evaluating our object candidates. We will only look at object candidates for the use case that we wrote up in the last video, the make bid use case. That will be good enough for this example. Let's read over the use case and look for objects. The use case starts when the account holder is viewing a single active listing and chooses to make a bid. So if I jot down some things there, I'm going to write account. Even though we haven't talked about logging in or anything, I still think an account might be an object. And then there's listing, of course, and bid. The system prompts the user to enter the bid amount. Now I think bid amount will probably just be a float, but let's write it down as a thing. The system confirms that the bid amount is greater than the current high bid. Current high bid is also a thing, also probably going to be a float. The bid is recorded as the current high bid, ending the use case. Here's a question. Where is that recorded? That's a responsibility that we'll need to assign somewhere, maintaining the current high bid. Okay, if we look at the two exceptional flow events, the first is there are no starting bids. The system confirms that the bid amount is greater than or equal to the minimum starting bid. Okay, that should say there are no bids. Here we go. The system confirms that the bid amount is greater than or equal to the minimum starting bid. So, minimum starting bid is another object candidate, again, probably just a float, and the second is the account holder's bid is not higher than the current bid or the minimum starting bid. If there were no bids, the system will reject the bid. No new objects there, but we are seeing system responsibilities to accept or reject bids that we will have to assign to some object in the system. So we identified the following object candidates: account, listing, bid, current high bid, and minimum starting bid. In addition, we've identified some responsibilities: accept and reject bids. Is there some auctioneer sort of object that interacts with the user or the account to obtain their bid and then accepts or rejects it after checking with the object responsible for maintaining the current high bid? Let's work with that idea. Suppose we have objects account, listing, bid, and auctioneer, and the bid numbers will simply be fields of some of those objects. How would we divide the responsibilities of this use case among those objects? Let's state what we think each of those objects is. The account would be information about the particular user, such as name, login information, maybe an ID. The account, because it can list auctions and bid on auctions, probably also has lists of bids and listings. So we have a class diagram of that, and we've roughed in the fields we think it will have. Listings are the items for auction and include the name of the item, description, and minimum bid amount. Does a listing also include a reference to the current high bid? Let's add that. A bid is an amount, but it also must reference the account making the bid and possibly the listing being bid on. And what about the auctioneer? This seems like a fairly independent object that manages bids, makes sure they follow the rules. While there will be many user accounts, listings, and bids, it seems like there would be only one auctioneer in the system. So we have a class diagram for that with the bid management responsibility. This association class diagram shows the relationships I just described with one added. This is a static picture of the system. We have the account class, which has a composition relationship with listing and bid, meaning that they are part of the account class and don't exist independent of it. Listing and bid also have a relationship with each other. The listing has a reference to its high bid, and the bid has a reference to the listing that it is a bid on. So that's a bidirectional navigation association. We also have the auctioneer object, and I believe there is only one per system. I've decided to give each account object a reference to the auctioneer. To me, this makes some sort of intuitive sense, sort of like registering and obtaining a paddle at an in-person auction so you can bid by raising your paddle. I think this will work out in our design, but it might not. We'll proceed with the design and find out. Now, while this static organization helps us figure out the fields of the objects, it doesn't really show us how the use case is fulfilled. I have some ideas in mind. We'll see how they play out when we move to use case fulfillment. Once we do figure out how the use case is fulfilled, we may find that this structure won't work. Before we move on to designing the collaborations that fulfill the use case in the next video, go through these diagrams carefully and compare them to the requirements. Did we get everything? You might come up with an alternate design, alternate objects to fulfill the use case, or an alternate organization of responsibilities. Or you may be wondering where the responsibilities will be situated in the objects we've got here, because we've talked more about data than getting the work done. Think about this some and come up with some alternate ideas before you move on to the next video.